now.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm thrilled with Carolyn to present to you someone, if you don't know Paul Levy's work, well, you have something absolutely thrilling to discover. When Carolyn and I were writing Radical Regeneration, we found ourselves diving again and again into two of our favorite books, both by Paul, Quantum Physics, which is quite simply the most dazzling, the most brilliant book ever written about the deep relationship between the discoveries of quantum physics and deep spirituality. It's an absolutely amazing book. I've read it 4 times. I've given it to everybody I know, and I'm going to collect your royalties from you, Paul.
Right.
Other book that we really mined again and again for our own benefit and also for the benefit of the book was Dispelling Wetiko. So when we finished the book, we were sitting around exhausted and said, who would we most like of all the major teachers now to really write one hell of an introduction to this book, which is the distillation of our life's work? And both of us said, Paul Levy. So we contacted Paul, and very graciously, he said yes. And then we expected a 2-page wonderful introduction, but Paul wrote an absolute masterpiece of an introduction, which is one of the greatest honors I think that both of us have ever been paid. So Paul, thank you, welcome. How lovely to see you and be with you.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here with you guys. So really just can't thank you enough for the invite.
Let's plunge in and ask you about this word Wetiko.
Yeah.
Because this has been so much your focus. You've just finished another book on Wetiko. How did you discover this concept, and why did it burst open your mind? I can't call you the orchestra of your mind, whatever the hell is in you, this multiple being that is writing these works for us.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the question. It's a great question. And basically, so I had personally gone through this incredible trauma where I had, in a sense, just to really cut right to the chase, just had a direct encounter with archetypal evil. And, I'm not going to go into the story about it, but the salient point is that I began to have the recognition that it wasn't just, it was in my family of origin through my father, but then I began to realize, wow, the same evil energy, and it was not a personal evil, it was an archetypal transpersonal evil, that it was coming through the field in all these different, sort of these ways. And at a certain point, I began to really understand, wow, this is really important. I was really beginning to see something. And it was as if something was through the manifestation of that darkness that was, it totally destroyed my family. It almost killed me. It almost drove me crazy. But actually something was being shown to me. I was able to establish myself in that viewpoint. And so then, sort of like this person who had come across a new country who was making a map, I began to, track it. And at that point, I wasn't even aware of the word Wetiko. It was only a number of years later where I came across a book, Columbus and Other Cannibals, where this indigenous scholar, Jack Forbes, introduced the term. And I realized, oh my God, this totally maps on to what I had been experiencing. And so that was really the doorway into how I discovered my work. And once I discovered my work, it really connected me with being creative, with my creative voice. If I hadn't connected with my voice, with that creative spirit that all of us interface with, but if I hadn't really gotten in intimate connection with that, I would have been in deep trouble. So I've basically devoted the rest of my life to really unfolding and articulating this idea of Wetiko, because it's at the bottom. It's this virus of the mind, you could say. You could conceive of it in that way. Like the coronavirus is a physical virus. Well, the coronavirus is this sort of lower level emanation of the higher dimensional virus of the mind called Wetiko. And I can explain that. But this mind virus is at the root of the madness that we're playing out collectively in the greater body politic of the world. And what I'm basically saying is that the source of the madness, the source of the evil that's playing out, is to be found within our psyche. And people think, what a radical idea, a mind virus, a parasite of the mind. But in essence, I think we all agree there's a collective psychosis going on that our species has fallen into and acting out an amazing insanity on the world stage. And I'm basically pointing out through the Wetiko idea, you can understand that, oh yeah, the origin and the source and the solution of that madness is to be found inside of our psyche.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know, in Radical Regeneration, we, the subtitle is Birthing the New Human in the Age of Extinction. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we've encountered, as you have, I'm sure, is a lot of fatalism around, well, we're screwed, that's it. We're going to all become extinct, blah, right. blah, blah. And that may be true. We would be the first to say that's really possible the way we're going.
Right.
And we were enchanted with the Quantum Revelation that right. you wrote in terms of the field of possibilities.
Right.
And so, we just said, well, it's possible that humanity will mostly be destroyed. There may be pockets of people who survive. And, we just raised the question, what would their lives be like? And what might they become? And we also are looking in this book at the birth of a new human species.
Right.
And is there a possibility of a mutation into a new human species through the horrible ordeal of collapse, of, climate catastrophe or whatever, through Wetiko? And wonder if you'd talk a little bit about the field of possibilities.
Yeah, for sure. No, I just love that contemplation because, so I'm not a physicist, but I'm just a really curious person. And then, I had this experience a number of years ago where I began to really have the recognition that this is a collective dream. And I began to really experience that and step into that. And then I found quantum physics and I had the realization, wow, the quantum physicists had discovered the same thing, but from the scientific point of view. And just in a simple way, I can explain, you see, because if we fall into pessimism, and there's all the evidence to confirm feeling pessimistic and filled with despair and depressed and helpless, but if we fall into that, I point out, well, that's to fall under the mind virus. That's to fall under the thrall of Wetiko, because being like a dream, if we're holding a point of view, we're going to then draw evidence confirming our point of view. And the more evidence we attract, then the more entrenched we are in that point of view. And it's a feedback loop whose origin is our own mind. And the trophy that we win is that we're screwed if we fall into that
yes.
point of view. So there's something that's wrong with that logic. And now here comes quantum physics. And quantum physics, in essence, is saying, well, I guess the first thing to establish is that the founding fathers discovered that this world, this universe, is quantum on all scales. It's quantum through and through. So it started out as the exploration of what are the building blocks of this physical world. And they really just kept on going down and down into different, the microstructure of the universe. And then at a certain point, they didn't find anything that was physical. They found consciousness, but that's a whole other story. But the point is that this whole cosmos is made of what are called quantum entities. And quantum entities are very, very interesting because they don't exist in a physical form. That what quantum physics basically discovered is that, you see, before quantum physics came along the scene, classical physicists were thinking that this world objectively existed separate from us, and we were just passively in the role of observing it, trying to understand how it worked. quantum physics comes along and it says, wow, there is no such world. If you're thinking there's an objective, this world separate from yourself, that's nonsense. There is no such thing. Quantum physics empirically proved that. On top of that, it actually pointed out that the act of observing the world actually influenced the world observed. That's just like a dream, I should point out. So the way we're observing, that the act of observation is creative, okay? That we have this incredible creative power. Every moment, we're creating our experience of ourselves and of the world each and every moment. But it even gets more far out than that, because these quantum entities are basically, they don't exist in physical form. They exist in a state of any and every potentiality they could ever exist in. That's the state a quantum entity exists in up until we observe it. The moment we observe the quantum entity, it actualizes into a particular form. All the other possibilities just dissolve as if they didn't exist. They go into parallel worlds. And that actualized form, that's the world we experience in the physical dimension. Now, quantum physics has proven that. What that means is as follows, because here's where it gets mind-blowing, is that any and every of those possibilities, those potentialities, quantum physics is saying, even if one of them, which is highly ridiculously unlikely, that could be the one that manifests this very moment. So to bring that back into our situation, that is to say that, yeah, we have all the evidence we need that, doom and gloom and we're screwed and we're destroying ourselves. And quantum physics comes in and says, well, there's a possibility that your species, that our species might actually, that enough of us might actually awaken in time such that non-locally will affect the entire field, and that all of our species can actually experience some form of expansion of consciousness and awaken in time to avert the impending catastrophe that we ourselves are creating. Quantum physics is saying that that's actually a possibility. And I would add, so that's not like new age woo-woo theory. That's
right.
And if we're not imagining that, if we're not thinking that, then what in the world are we thinking? If we're caught by that pessimism in that self-created feedback loop, we're part of the problem. That's going to actually, like a self-fulfilling prophecy, we're going to invoke the very universe that's going to confirm to us the truth of our pessimism. But quantum physics is saying, if you're doing that, you're out of your mind. You're not in touch with reality. The reality is there is a possibility that we can actually awaken. And why not imagine that?
Well, it's more than that. Sorry, darling. Can I just, it's more than that in your book, because you say, one of the things that I have marveled at in your book is that you go beyond observation. You talk about intention.
Yeah.
It's beyond observing reality. If we're in a dream, a collective dream, then in more and more enlightened intention you bring to the dreaming of the dream, the more the dream can transform itself in a way that aids the birth of a new humanity.
Right. Because okay, I'm so glad you said that, because it's not just like, oh yeah, this is a dream, and that means the outside the environment is reflecting our inner state. Yeah, it means that, but it also means that our inner state is expressing itself via the outside world. It's a feedback loop. It's a reciprocal co-arising feedback loop where we have an agency, where we have this enormous creative power. You see, that's what quantum physics is pointing at. That we aren't passive observers, but we have this enormous creative power each and every moment. But you see, the source of Wetiko, the mind virus, is that we are not in touch with our creative powers. We are these geniuses, each and every one of us. We're these creative, these total, just have enormous creative power and agency. But to the extent we're not awake to it, we're holding it unconsciously in a way where our genius for invoking reality gets turned against us in such a way that we're actually destroying ourselves. And when that gets writ large collectively, you see the world that we're living in today. That's what's actually happening. So I'm pointing at that the solution to all of the world crises is for each and every one of us, because it starts on the individual with each one of us, to the extent that any of us, we connect with our creative power and genius. That's where the solution is to be found. And then the next step, when one person does that, okay, that's great. It'll improve their lives a lot. But then when you hook up with other people who are also awakening to that and are plugging into the collective genius and are having the realization, we can hang out together in a way where we all support and empower each other's awakening, that it's not a competitive sport, who's more awake, you or me. But if I help, with you, that helps me because we're not separate. You see, what all this is about, the whole thing about Wetiko disease is that it has to do with identifying yourself in this limited way, and you then become caught by this limited identity of the separate self that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that you're actually colluding in creating each and every moment. And then being a dream, you're going to draw all the evidence confirming that is who you are. And that's a form of madness. That's what Wetiko is. But when we begin to actually snap out of that self-created spell and snap out of that kind of fiction that we exist as a separate self and recognize we exist, actually, we're interdependent, we're interconnected, that's where we can actually access this enormous power to change the dream. And that's not just theory. That's actually what's being, not only is it being offered to us, it's being demanded of us, or we're not going to make it.
It's being demanded of us as an evolutionary leap.
Mhm.
Right. And one thing about the evolutionary leap, the thing about the Wetiko, sort of disease, because it's a collective psychosis, instead of like when you have like a bug and it'll transform and do a mutation to become, sort of to not, we develop medicine and it mutates, protect itself. Wetiko doesn't do that. It forces us to mutate. It forces us to evolve.
It's a negative mutation, yeah.
Yeah. Like it's the sort of thing, if Wetiko didn't exist, we would have to create it. It's actually helping the evolution of the species. You see, the thing about Wetiko, it's a quantum phenomena. And what that means is that encoded in the bug are the two opposites. Or it's like the source of the greatest evil. It can take us down and destroy us, or it can actually help us to wake up. And how it manifests as, the evil or the medicine, it depends on if we have the recognition what it's showing us. That's what my whole work is about, is basically saying what's happening in the world is a dreaming process, just like a dream. It's speaking symbolically. That's the language of dreams. It's actually showing us something about ourselves. And just like a dream, if you don't get the message, you'll have just recurring dreams more and more in more and more amplified forms of the nightmare until you finally get the message. So I'm basically saying, hey, if we look at it this way, we'll actually get the message and we'll begin to wake up. And that's going to help everyone.
I'm wondering, Paul, the name of your website is Awaken in the Dream.
Right.
And we've used the word awaken here now, all of us, about 25,000 times.
Right.
What really, and I know we all have our different versions of this, but what does awaken mean to you? Waking up, what does it mean to you?
Right. So I had this experience, and it was based on my trauma in 1981. I was in such deep, the suffering was incredible, that I had an awakening, quote unquote. And one way to describe it was that, I began to have the realization that this world is a dream. Not that it's like a metaphor. It's not a metaphor. It's not, it's like a dream. No, this world is nothing other than a dream. And just like when you have a dream at night, in a dream at night, if you're not awake to the nature of your circumstance, you're going to think you're inhabiting this world that's solid and separate and objective from yourself. And then if you actually have the recognition, I'm in a dream, I have this lucidity at that moment, all of a sudden, that's where you can, really step into the dream and transform the dream, transform yourself, and evolve in that dream. So that's with, at night when we have a dream, I'm saying that the same thing is available to us in this collectively shared dream, that any of us can have the recognition, oh my God, we are actually inside of our psyche. That instead of being out of our minds,
Yes.
we're in our minds. And what that means is that you guys are like these dream characters of mine, and I'm a dream character of yours. And what is a dream like? When you have a dream and you wake up at night, in the morning, and you think about the dream, oh, what part of myself was Andrew and Carolyn? Was that another part of myself? They're embodied reflective aspects of parts of the dreamer, and if I can just, like, one way of really understanding the profundity of what's available to us is to contemplate, okay, to step into the dream via the imagination. So say we're having a dream, and whatever we're perceiving, right, is just this reflection of our psyche. Because what is the dream but an outpicturing? It's a reflection of our mind. Okay, so if we're holding a perspective in that dream, the dream, which is nothing other than our mind, has no choice but to just reflect back that perspective. Well, the thing which is interesting, just contemplate that. So all of a sudden, you're holding a viewpoint. Here, the dream is offering you all the evidence, confirming that viewpoint, because it's just a reflection. And of course, how are you going to interpret that? You're going to interpret that, well, I'm seeing what's objectively there. And so the more, because you have the evidence, and then you become fixed in that viewpoint. And the more fixed in that viewpoint you become, well, what's the dream going to do? It has no choice but to just offer you even more evidence, confirming the reality of your viewpoint. So you're convinced you're seeing objective reality, and the more evidence it gives you, the more you become fixed in that viewpoint. Ad infinitum. It's a feedback loop whose origin is your own mind. And if you take a look at what I just described in that dream, you can easily convince yourself that you're seeing objective reality.
Absolutely.
That, oh no, it's nothing to do. I'm just a passive observer.
Right.
What I'm describing, that's what quantum physics blew the cover on. Quantum physics comes along and says, hey, if you think that this is objective, you're out of your mind. This is dreamlike. Quantum physics has discovered, empirically proven, that this is a collectively shared dream. That's why I wrote that book. And so when you see that, you realize, oh my God, each of us has in us this innate, this intelligence, this genius for how we actually mold and forge and create reality. But when we're not awake to that, it gets turned against us in a way that's killing us.
And you know this too from your Tibetan Buddhist affiliation.
Right.
Because I don't have to tell you, but I've been initiated into Mahayana Buddhism, and you're taught from the very beginning that the divine figures that you're meditating on are emanations of your own mind, and that all the practices are to grow your sense of the vast power of your own mind. So you chose to be a Tibetan Buddhist, and the Tibetan Buddhists discovered this 1,000 years ago, didn't they?
Right.
Buddhism itself discovered it, but they evolved the techniques for working compassionately in the dream to transform the dream.
Well, and one way that I love to describe Tibetan Buddhism, because I've been, doing the practice for, a long time, since the early 80s. And that is, being a dream. What is a dream? But it's like it's like the mind projecting itself out. It's a projection of the mind. And when we project onto the inkblot of the waking dream, when we typically project, it creates sort of like being separate from other people, being separate from the world, because we're not seeing the world. We're seeing, just our own projection. And so we're not actually in relationship to the world. So what Tibetan Buddhism did, it says, hey, we all project. We're projecting 24/7. Why don't we access that projective tendency of the mind consciously in a way that's actually going to help us to remember. So instead of it creating separation, it actually will help us to remember who we've always been. So yeah, we, on the screen of our consciousness, we actually, create this image, like, we actually have the projection of the deity, which is our higher self or God or Jesus or Buddha, whatever the symbol that speaks to your soul. And you're first in relationship to it and praying to it and receiving grace and blessings. And then you step into the image. Then you actually,
you melt
take
into
on,
it, actually.
you melt into it, you take on the pride of the deity. And if the deity has a body of light, not a solid fleshy body, but a body of light, you have that body of light, and and you're just, all of a sudden, all the blessings you've received, you're just radiating out to the whole universe. And the whole thing is your creative imagination. But Buddhism is saying, but every moment your experience is a function of your creative imagination. That's what quantum physics is pointing at. And being that that's so, why not plug into that consciously in a way that's going to help both you and others? And the expression of that realization of when you actually have the understanding, the experiential, insight into the dreamlike nature is compassion. Exactly. That's our nature. That's our true nature.
So Paul, you're speaking about helping people, and I know that you not only practice Buddhism, but I believe you have groups, you teach people, and you've written this vast treasure house of books, and you're a therapist, I believe, as well.
So, no, not. I can't call my, no, I don't have any, any graduate degree, but I have a lot of therapists who study with me. Interestingly. Yeah. Totally.
So therapists study with you, you write books, you have some other kinds of groups.
Right.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah. No, well, and the thing with the groups, they're not just ordinary groups. It's not just like a group therapy or like, no, it's a group. So a whole community in Portland, Oregon, where I am, is formed around my work. And I've been doing these groups for over 25 years. And it's basically, bringing people together who are awakening to the dreamlike nature. And instead of that just being a theory, what if we were to really step into the dream? So, I have I have one tomorrow night, and the night after that, and the night after that. Three groups every week, and then I have one that's once a month. And when people are in the groups for over 20 years, some of the average tenure of the groups might be 12 years, each person in the group for a weekly group. And, they're all healers and shamans and therapists and artists, people who've really done their work and who have experience of, this being a collectively shared dream. And what about if you bring people like that together and get to hang out without any agenda other than just to explore, what if this is a dream? What if we were to step into that? What would that show us? What would that look like? And it's an evolutionary thing. And it's available to all of us. I've been trying to get this out to people for years. I remember, Andrew, you and I went for a walk in the woods at the monastery, and that was way back when. And I was trying to explain to you, I'm doing this thing with
I remember very well, and I didn't get it at the time because I was so infuriated by the Advaita Vedantin's dismissal of reality. And I didn't get the profundity of what you're saying, because you're not saying that it is unreal, because reality, the terror and horror that we're living in, is appallingly real.
Yes, it's
but
real.
You're saying that the very real itself is a dream.
Right. And that there's a way, and that there's a way. Yeah. I remember that really clearly, because I remember being frustrated, because I was wanting to transmit this thing that I had created. And so just fast forward, here it is, 25 years later, and I'm still doing the groups, and it's getting out all over the place. And but what the point is that it's not just something that I'm doing. It's something that's available for all of us. There is a way of hanging out where, say the three of us right now can be a group, and say if all of a sudden, wow, what you just said, Andrew, it really triggered me. Well, instead of in the normal, day-to-day life, if you trigger me, oh, you're the problem, and if you would only not do that, I wouldn't be triggered. It's like, no, if you trigger me, wow, what an incredible, great thing.
What a gift.
What an opportunity. What in me is being triggered, and all of a sudden, instead of putting my attention out on you, I'm actually putting my attention back on myself. You see, because what Wetiko does, it influences where we place our attention so that we think the problem is outside of ourselves. And then as soon as we think, oh, the problem is this politician or that external thing, then Wetiko just has a feast because it goes unseen. But when we actually trace it back to ourselves, because here's the most amazing thing about Wetiko. It's an inner disease of the soul, right?
Yes.
It's a psychospiritual disease of the soul, but somehow it has the magical ability to extend itself out into the world and seemingly configure outside events so as to synchronistically reflect the state of a psyche that's under its thrall. Okay, so that's really interesting, because what that means is that, wait, so what's happening in the outer dimension of our experience in the world is actually reflecting what's actually happening in me in this synchronistic way. Wait a second, that's a description of a dream. You see, because when you see, there are three ways to see Wetiko, because it operates through it operates through the parts of us that are asleep. If I have this part, oh, I'm unconscious of something, I have whatever, you see, the thing about Wetiko, it's this blindness. It's a psychic form of blindness. When we have the blind spot, that's how Wetiko comes in through us. And so once you begin to see it, all of a sudden it has no power over you. But to see it means, if you think somebody out there has Wetiko, oh, so-and-so Mr. President has Wetiko and I don't, that point of view of being polarized, that's Wetiko, and that is Wetiko, right? So the idea is, if you see somebody out there embodying Wetiko and you recognize that's reflecting that unconscious part of me, then you're beginning to wake up and to dispel Wetiko. So there's three of these sort of aspects of how you see Wetiko. First is to see this as a dream. When you recognize the dreamlike nature, oh yeah, we're dream characters, we're not separate. That leads into the second way, to see through the illusion of the separate self. And then the third way, and all three are connected, they're not separate, is the field, the non-local field in physics, that we are contained within the non-local field and we're expressions of the non-local field. And to see that is to snap out of this imagination that we exist in a separate way. And to actually have that recognition, that's to recognize that we're interdependent and interconnected. To step into our true identity, and the expression of that, like we were saying, is compassion, is love, and that's the medicine. And we wouldn't have recognized, we wouldn't have gotten to that place without Wetiko. So that's what I mean, that it's actually a catalyst to help us to connect with who we are.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question about our collective reality. We have just lived through, and we're not done yet, 4 years of complete madness and Wetiko out in front of us that is a reflection of us.
Right.
That has left us with a division and a sense of hatred of fact that is absolutely, I think, as severe a virus mentally as Corona is physically.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And do you see any of that shifting, or what's your take?
Well, yeah, and it's a quantum situation. And what I mean by that is that it exists in a state of, possibility, of potentiality, because when there's such a disassociation, both in the individual psyche and collective psyche, and there's the polarization, like our body politic has never been more polarized. From the dreaming point of view, that means that something is potentially giving birth through
Absolutely.
that, and that's where, it enter, with the whole dark night of the soul. Well, are we going to successfully accomplish that birth? And we are the being that's birthing, we're the one who's dying, and we're the midwife for all of it. And that's what I mean, that it's all in a state of potentiality. And that's why, you see, it's so important to not concretize our situation, because being like a dream, this is in a very fluid state. And by our immense power that we have, if we concretize this world as being really, doom and gloom and all that, then we're unwittingly colluding in creating the very destruction that we're reacting against. And
but you do have to name the horror and the destruction, and you do it as brilliantly as anybody. You name exactly what's going on, because you've studied Wetiko like an ornithologist study birds. You understand how it moves.
Yeah,
and you understand how devastating it potentially is.
The big mistake, Andrew, is that because I have a lot of friends, these new age people who, are incredibly beautiful people, good-hearted, well-intentioned, very, intelligent, and they don't wanna like put their attention on the darkness, and they're avoiding it. And I try to point out, well, Wetiko actually gets fed by our turning this blind eye to it. In our avoidance, we're avoiding relationship with a part of ourselves. So, and so many of these fairy tales talk about when there's a demon, you have to name it.
That's it.
And by finding the right name, and the thing with Wetiko, that's just one name. It doesn't make a difference what the name is. It just has to be the right name, the proper name for that demon, because all mythologies point out when you find the name of the offending demon, it takes away its power and it empowers you. So that's why it's so important, to actually to speak the name, to find the name, for evil, because evil, I'm not talking in a theological sense. I'm just talking in the psychological sense. It's as real as we are. People who think, oh no, evil isn't real. Well, are you blind? I mean, just look around what's playing out on every scale, And so I'm pointing out that, and like I'm saying, it really saddens me that some of these really beautiful spiritual people, oh no, I don't want to place my attention on evil because that'll feed it. Well, yeah, on one level that'll feed it, but it'll more feed it by you avoiding it. But when you see how Wetiko works, and you see the evil in the world, and you see how it operates within your own minds by your unconscious reactions to the evil out there, then when you see Wetiko, then as a sovereign being, you have a choice of okay, where I'm going to place my attention. And now that I see you, I don't want to become overly fascinated with evil. Now I want to invest my attention in creating the world I want to live in. And that the thing about Wetiko, it can't stand that because it feeds off of our attention.
I once met an exorcist on a train, and we had the most fascinating conversation. And he said the one thing the demon cannot stand is either being ignored or being laughed at.
Right.
So fundamentally, the New Agers are cowards. They don't really believe in their divinity, because if they did, they would know they were strong enough to face anything about themselves and about human nature. They would be so grounded in truth.
Well,
they wouldn't be.
That's exactly it. And I talk about that in my work, that, if we're going to really have it out with Wetiko, with evil, which we're fated to do, if we're not connected with who we are, with the higher self, then we don't stand a chance. But that higher self, that's not possessible by that evil force. That's transcendent to it. That's already free and always pure. That's our nature. And Wetiko is doing everything it can to distract us from that, to forget that. But when you actually remember and really stabilize that realization, then Wetiko can't get any toehold in you at all.
Right.
Yeah. But one other thing I keep, because I haven't said that, there's so many things. I mean, we can talk for hours. There are so many things that I want to share, but one of the most important things is the profound importance of accessing being creative.
Yes.
And I can talk from my own experience, because the thing about Wetiko, it's this daimonic energy, and the daimon is the inner voice and the guiding spirit. It has to do with the angel and with finding your calling and
your mission,
to do and your mission. Exactly, all those things. And the thing about Wetiko being this daimonic energy, it can possess a person or a group of people or a collective, group of people. And then we just become unwittingly its instruments to compulsively act it out. Now, the thing about this Wetiko being a daimonic energy, the daimon also, you see, if you're not in conscious relationship to that daimon, the inner voice guiding spirit, it constellates negatively and becomes a demon. Okay. Right. And encoded in that daimon is the creative spirit. Right. So what I'm basically saying is that unless we connect with our creative voice, and and it's just what Christ says in the apocryphal text, you're so familiar. If you bring forth what's within you, it'll save you. If you don't bring forth what's within you, it'll destroy you. It's that idea that, and I'm speaking out of my own personal experience, when I had my unmediated direct confrontation with archetypal evil, with Wetiko, and I got a transfusion of it in my very soul, and it made me sick for years, that if I wasn't able to connect with the creative spirit in me, I mean, I would have been, I don't even want to think about what would have happened to me. But, connecting with the creative spirit, that's informed my books and my work, and it's helping people all over the world. And that's the idea of like the healer who has this, the wounded healer, which is the shaman. And we're all wounded healers in training. And the idea being is through our wound, it's by holding that wound in a certain way where we're not just avoiding it or dissociating, or identifying with it, but we're actually consciously just carrying it in a way that becomes the portal to our gifts. And that's really the figure, the archetype of the wounded healer, the shaman, the artist, the storyteller. That's who we are.
The sacred activist.
Yeah, exactly, sacred activism.
Because that's creativity at the highest. Imagine sacred activism with the vision of the transfiguration process that we lay out in Radical Regeneration, with the vision that you've laid out so brilliantly in quantum physics and in your Wetiko work. Imagine if sacred activists were trained in those and given the meditative tools of the refined Buddhist tools and the other mystical tools. Then sacred activism would become creative at a level that it hasn't even begun to glimpse yet.
Right.
And it would be directly transformative of reality.
Yeah. And just because your idea of like the sacred activism is so profound in the sense that, people, these spiritual people who think, no, I don't want to engage in the body politic because I'm too busy meditating and doing my mantras. And I would point out to them, but your inner process, being like a dream, is manifesting as the outer world, which means that the way to actually integrate your inner process is to engage actively in the world, that the two aren't separate.
Right.
Yeah.
Carolyn, have you got a last question, my darling? It's wonderful to have you, Paul. We could speak with you for the next. This could go on forever and ever, and I hope it will one day soon.
It is absolutely fantastic. I don't really have any more questions. I just want to tell you how much I've appreciated what you have to say about quantum physics, and it's inspired me to read more about quantum physics. And one of the things that's so amazing to me, and I just love it, it's almost like going to church, is how these quantum physicists speak of the ultimate reality, how they speak of the sacred, of the divine, without using those words, because it's changed them completely. I mean, my God, look at Einstein. Just look at the way they have integrated the spiritual and the physical because of their research. And so you've put me on a path of exploring more.
Yeah, no, that's great. And the thing with Einstein, I mean, he was one of the founding fathers, but he actually couldn't embrace the full reality, because
the full quirkiness of it.
Yeah, he was still attached to that there was an objective world. And he couldn't quite let go of that idea. It was just an idea, but it was clear from his work he wasn't able to let go of that, because to let go of that is this fully step into the dream. And like, I guess one final thing that I want to add about the quantum physics idea, or the insights that are emerging, which is just, it's so psychedelic, is that when you have the realization like quantum physics is pointing out, that there's no objective world, and that, okay, there's no objective world. The act of me observing the world is influencing the world observed. So therefore my act of observation is creative. Therefore the world is like a dream. Well, what that means, the implication of that is that if there's no objective, anything really, whether it be things or people or this universe out there, there's nothing objective. All of a sudden, what about the subject? Because
Right.
I, as a subject, I have to have an object to be in relationship to in order to be a subject, in order to be a separate self. If all of a sudden there's no object, then wait a second, what happened to the subject? So all of a sudden, quantum physics is promoting itself to be a spiritual path because it's flooding light on who we are. Okay.
Exactly.
And that, Carolyn, I think is what you're pointing at.
Yes.
That these founding fathers of quantum physics and even the current day quantum physicists, as they're wrapping, because they didn't sign up, when they went to graduate school to become a scientist, this isn't what they signed up for. They're like forced to wrap their mind around what they're realizing, which has to do with our nature.
It actually caused them to have nervous breakdowns, didn't it?
Yes.
Right.
And be terrified because the revelation
Exactly.
of emptiness which is fundamentally a fecund, paradoxical emptiness that creates everything. That's what quantum physics is, how quantum physics and Tibetan Buddhism are so aligned, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah. Well, I think of the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form.
Right.
And the idea being that, this world is emptiness itself appearing in the form of form, but it's not separate from the emptiness. Its nature is empty. There's nothing, there's no physical substructure. That's what quantum physics discovered. It actually plugged into the Buddha's realization of the empty nature of phenomena and the empty nature of ourselves and the empty nature of our mind. That's what it basically, from the scientific point of view, it plugged into the same realization that the Buddha had.
And we're looking at this marriage potentially in the future of the deepest mystical wisdom with the highest scientific discoveries of the quantum field. And I've been working on a project called The Field, which I'd love to talk to you about between us, because if we can find a way of bringing people together with deepest mystical training and scientific openness and the intention to turn up as creative, transformative agents in the dream, then we're potentially training the new species.
Yeah. And that's exactly it, because then bringing people together like that, it's a contagious thing, where if somebody is in touch with their unconscious in a way that, they're really just, the permeability between their guidance and their ego, they're continually just, interfacing and in touch with themselves in that way. One very simple way to think about it, when you're hanging out with someone who's really, has some form of creativity and awakening and, and access to their unconscious, it like affects us. When we hang out with people like that, we all of a sudden start feeling more inspired, more creative. Well, just imagine bringing people together like that who are plugging into the quantum, who are having the realization that we're quantum activists, and that and discovering we can dream ourselves awake, we can conspire to co-inspire each other. You talk about having, well, I'm a conspiracy theorist. Absolutely, that's available to us. We can activate the collective intelligence in us in a way that we've only begun to imagine. That's available to us. That's what quantum physics is showing us, that it's completely available to us right now. It's not even like we have to think about that.
It's all here, but it's three things, because we have the mystical systems, the highest wisdom of this fecund emptiness that we are one with. We have quantum physics discovering these astounding possibilities, and we now have a global technology that could interconnect us. Imagine what could happen through the bringing together of all of those.
And that global technology, until it's channeled in a way that's going to be helpful, it's potentially destroying us.
Either Wetiko or the enlightened consciousness uses technology. It's a neutral tool.
Right. It's exactly it. And that's the idea. That's what I'm pointing out when I say that Wetiko is a quantum phenomena that has encoded in the Wetiko virus it's like the deepest evil that can destroy us, or it's the highest good and blessing that can awaken us. And how it manifests, being quantum, depends on how we observe it, how we dream it. If we recognize what it's showing us, that's really the bottom line.
But it's more than how we observe it. It's how we take responsibility for being creators of the dream.
Well, right. It's not just observing it in a passive way.
Right.
Then we're actually, this is quantum physics. We're participating in the invocation of our universe moment by moment. It's not just because you're right. Even the word observing, it sort of has a connotation of passive. But quantum physics is saying, no, we're not just passive observers of anything. We're active participants moment by moment. That's where so basically we entrance ourselves. We hypnotize ourselves by the actual creative power of our own minds. That's really the source of Wetiko. That's the source of the evil and the madness that's playing out. And encoded in that energy is the solution.
I do have one more question, Paul. Speaking of the New Age, sometimes people in New Age circles talk about you create your own reality.
Right.
And on a quantum level, that's true. And it also can be used to, I want a new Ferrari.
Right.
So, if I do all the right things, I'll create this reality. Or negatively, I have cancer, so I created my own illness.
Right.
Can you
And
say
then you
more
feel
about all
sick.
of that?
Right. Sure. Yeah. That triggers me to no end because, on one hand, there is intelligence to that. But then I would say, okay, great. Who's the you? Who's creating that?
Right.
Show me that you,
Yeah.
because they're undoubtedly they're identified with this reference point in space and time, the illusion of the separate self. And if they're wanting like a Cadillac or a Rolls Royce or whatever, they're, of course, the law of attraction, let's dream up physical stuff where that's not the point. The point is to get in touch with who we actually are, and who we actually are is not the separate self.
Yes.
But that authentic self, that's actually not separate. Like one a very beautiful way of understanding this. So when I get in touch with my authentic self, I have the realization, oh well, I don't exist, in this like, as this separate self, separate from anybody else. I'm only existing. I have a relationship with all of you, with two of you, with everyone, right? But think about, okay, I have this a relationship to you, but you don't exist as a separate self either. You exist relative to someone else, and they don't exist as a separate self. They only exist relative to other people and the rest of the universe. Right. You can't find a reference point anywhere. When you have the realization of that, what you discover is that there's no separate self anywhere to be found. Right. Now, when you tap into that, how does that want to dream? Yeah. Does that want a yellow Cadillac or a Rolls Royce? Or does that want to actually get more in phase with itself and become congruent and actually experience its connectedness, which is its nature? And the expression of that realization is love and compassion. That's what I would say to those people.
Oh, thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Really appreciate it.
I really loved our conversation. And anybody listening, I just want to recommend that you read Paul Levy's amazing book, Quantum Revalation, and also Dispelling Wetiko. Yes. And watch out for the new book, which will be out soon, I hope in fall.
The new title is, Paul? The title of the new
Seeing Wetiko, Healing Our Mind Blindness.
Thank you.
Seeing Wetiko, Healing Our Mind Blindness, right? And that's I'm hoping that's going to be the final title. That's tentative, but I think it's a good enough title.
I think it's a fabulous title. Don't change your word. Congratulations.
Right, totally. Yeah, and I just want to thank you guys so much. It's so fun. Just,
so lovely to see you again, Paul. I hope we have many chances to do this, because there are many questions I have to ask you, and I'd love you to be part of this adventure that I've been cooking up.
No, I just feel like we activated, the three of us just super activate each other. And that's what it's all about, to hang out with people who do that, because then we can change things. I mean, absolutely.
And they can change very, very fast.
Yes, they can.
That is what is also something that your book taught me, Quantum revelation, because it is, we're hung up, part of Wetiko is to make us feel that things have to go gradually, but in fact evolution proceeds by convulsions, and sometimes those convulsions are horrifically destructive, and sometimes they throw up absolutely new combinations of forces.
Right. And
That's the one we're aiming for.
That is so right on. When I was talking about having an awakening in 1981, you know, which almost killed me and got me diagnosed, oh, you're just out of your mind. And I told her that's true, I was. But that happened to me. That stuff, physically impossible stuff that was absolutely impossible to happen in the third dimension was happening in that one moment. I was in one universe, and the next moment the whole universe had completely morphed. And it was very destabilizing for my conscious ego. But over the years, as I've been contemplating it, I've more and more understood, oh, I see, I was beginning to see the nature of reality.
God bless you. Thank you. Thank you for your fantastic work. It's an honor.
Totally. Guys, thank you so much, really.
Thank
really
you for everything. We love you. God bless you.
Love
Thank you.
Everyone.